Zoom. Screen share. Ta-da!
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go, Carla.
Now I go up and hit play.
Yep.
Slideshow. Oh my, I can see you guys. That's what the problem was. Oh shoot, but you're all over there pretty big on the side. I'd like to make you smaller so I could read my notes, but well, I have them on my phone here. So anyway, so let me give you a little background on me. I did have polio in 53. I was not hospitalized. It was the big family secret. And I wasn't diagnosed until I was about 22. I have been a passer all of my life. And Marcy says that I still am a passer because she saw me walk up and down stairs, which I don't think counts, does it? Anyway, in 1967, I finished my physical therapy degree. And for the first 5 years of my work, I worked with adults. And I did have a few, I was in San Francisco, and I did have a few polio survivors who I worked with. One was a young woman who had just had twins, and she was fully in a wheelchair. And I thought, how do you care for twins in a wheelchair? I mean, it was like, no, that's not possible. Then I started working with infants and preschoolers for about 35 years. The program that I worked with had a very strong infant parent mental health perspective. So much of my knowledge on this subject comes from my experience with infants and families who've told me their stories, and many of you who've told me what your journey was like in your early years. I retired back in 2006, so I shouldn't have any competence in this area anymore, right? Anyway, little background on my history with this subject. There's a person on this call named Benjamin Rowe, and he was working on his autobiography, and he was struggling with the early childhood part. He lives in Denver. I was on one of the Denver calls. I had met him previously at the camp in Colorado, and I offered to read through it and see what he might be struggling with. And what came out of that, I don't think you can read it. Ben, I'm screwing up. I have your book right here.
Carla, you're doing great.
Anyway, his book is called A Boy Survives. It's his autobiography, A Journey Through Polio with Hope, Self-Discovery, Healing, and Resilience. And it's by J. Benjamin Rowe Jr., DVM, not Department of Motor, no, it's D-Min, Doctorate in Ministry, not the DMV. And it is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and it's a really great read. I should have put a picture of the book on the screen, but I didn't. I would really love you to hold your questions till the end, because I tend to take bird walks, and we won't get through the material if I take a bird walk. So, okay, Marcy, the scroll down thing is not working. Just a minute.
Try using an arrow key.
That's what I'm using.
Oh, oops.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Oops. You think I could tap down? No.
How about the enter key?
That's what I was just thinking. Nope.
Hmm.
Shift isn't working.
Done this before myself.
Yeah, it's annoying. if I hit show screen meeting now? It's not going to do anything. You know why I think it's, do you see where it says, okay, Marcy? This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, you click OK.
I can't click OK.
Oh, you can't?
I don't have a cursor
Oh,
since I'm on screen share.
oh, I wonder if that's holding you up, because I can't do it for you at this end. It's on your screen.
Marcy, what happens if she sends you the PowerPoint real fast and you can put it up and you can run it while she talks about it?
Okay.
Oh, I got it. It just went down.
Okay, we're good.
And I don't know what I did to make it go down, but whatever. I have some disclaimers. As you know, not all of us are the same. And all polios are different. There isn't one of us in this group or on the planet that has the exact same weaknesses as anybody else. Not all of us had bad experiences in the hospitals that we were in. Some were thankfully at home where they were cared for by family and caregivers came in. Many had very different early childhood experiences as well. I had a family that shouldn't have had kids, but you wouldn't be hearing me speak if they hadn't. What the heck? I can't speak to how children and parents were treated in other countries and other cultures, because I don't know that. So one disclaimer is that I'm generalizing about how things were in the 40s and 50s in the United States. And as I said above, not all of you had bad hospitalizations. My hope is that this information brings you understanding of what happened and offers you opportunities for self-soothing and self-forgiveness about some of the stuff that you may find flying back in your face now that was actually from when you were very young. Some of this material might strike a painful chord for some of you. And I feel that when we experience strong emotions, that may come out of our prolonged hospitalization. We had no words to explain what was happening. We had only feelings or sensations. And this might give you a chance to acknowledge and put to words what happened and thus to heal better. Okay, let's try the next one. What did I do? Oh, nope, that one went up. Down. Aha. Oh, I'm so happy. Anyway, as far as trust, abandonment, and detachment, understanding how our early childhood hospitalizations might have caused us to have issues with trust and detachment and abandonment later in life allows us to look inside and maybe to change those challenges or learn to live with them better by accepting the knowledge as part of coming out of your early childhood hospitalization. And during that time, most of us did not have words. We had only feelings that came up because most of us were pre-verbal. Even the kids at 4 and 5 did not understand what was going on. As we adapted to living with these early traumas, the traumas themselves actually became less powerful, but they continued to exist. And we kind of normalized being in the hospital. That's a terrible thing to normalize, but it did happen. So as that occurred and the child aged, the child came to carry the early issues of trust, abandonment, and attachment into their adult lives. These issues were not always fully in consciousness, but when, as an adult, trust is challenged, abandonment or detachment in relationships occurs. Abandonment occurs These items are deeply felt inside our inner pre-verbal child. So they aren't felt as you might have felt them if you were a teenager when you had polio and were hospitalized. When such events occur, each of us can wonder if they are related to our early childhood hospitalization. We can ask for some help. We can ignore it. If we ignore it, the event may continue to occur, but change can occur when we advocate for ourselves and understand that the event may have been part of our early childhood trauma. Okay, that one worked. It just is a touch, not a swipe. So the impact of polio on infant toddler development. I'm going to go through the stages of development to some degree so that you can see where I'm coming from. I'm going to take a 2-year-old just because I think 2-year-olds are a gas. And they are preverbal and they're very fun. So, but every age is different as to how you all were impacted by your polio. And actually, I think most of you who were impacted before you were 5 or 6 were hit the hardest. 2-year-olds don't have concepts for words for detachment, trust, abandonment. They do have feelings of these words. And those feelings may emerge later in life. All 3 of these concepts involve both the child and their parent feeling them. So let's look at the motor development of a 2-year-old. Can any of you picture your own 2-year-olds? They are learning to run. They do some face plants. They're trying to jump. They're trying to squat down and play, starting to climb. They're very kind of curious about where all their body parts are in space. And as you see them running along in the sun, you watch them looking at their shadow. You know they're not going to see the pothole in front of them and they're going to fall splat on the ground. But, you know, they are learning about all these things. They will walk away from their parent, take a quick turn of their head and check back in. Then they'll go a little farther, and then they'll kind of run back to their parent. Then they may take their parent's hand and say, let's go. And the parent will go with them on their little adventure. But when polio hits a 2-year-old, let's say they're both legs and an arm are paralyzed. The child can't move these in the very beginning of the illness. They are in pain. They become very fearful, and they can't figure out what is going on. The child was previously guaranteed of being picked up, but now that they are in the hospital in a crib full time, some of the predictability of caregiving is reduced, and thus they start possibly feeling some detachment because their parents aren't there to pick them up. Parents can see this loss of function as they're watching their child through the glass window once a week. And the child's intuition feels the parent's terror. It's very disorganizing and confusing for the child and the parents. Why can't mom and dad pick me up? Why can't I move? Those are words that kind of are in their heads, but they're more feelings. Mom and dad have always picked me up before, and they aren't even here to do that now. Language and communication development of a 2-year-old is also fun. They're playing with sound. They still are babbling, you know, making some ridiculous combinations of sounds that their adults always laugh at. They also may be resistive and they may tantrum. But they are often putting two words together, but they're still pre-verbal. They think, in fact, they know inside of themselves that all family members do understand them, which is not true. The family members look at each other and say, "What did he say?" And neither one of them can figure it out. So they just kind of acknowledge the iteration that was made. But new sounds and new words come in every day. And the parents respond to that with joy and laughter and real pleasure. And then when polio hits, in some cases, yes, their vocal cords and respiratory function will change their voice quality, and that will frighten them. But all of a sudden, there are no parents around, and there's no ability to be understood. The child, why can't these people understand what I'm saying? You know, when your grandkids come over who are tiny, they're 2 plus or minus, and they're trying to talk to you, you can't understand them because you don't live with them. And the caregivers can't understand them. And they're very aware, they are very aware that their parents are not there, that they are in some kind of a strange place, and they are unable to formulate answers to their own questions of what the heck is going on. And thus trust comes in their lives. They don't trust these caregivers, and the child may start to detach from their parents and the caregivers. And often, because the caregivers are so rushed, there's a very lack of loving tone in the caregivers' voices. The parents are able to visit once a week. That was standard operating procedure back then. And they can see the child's frustration, and they feel sad and frustrated at not being able to understand what's going on with their child. The parents may start detaching from their child at this point, which is really sad, but that is a reality of what happens. I mentioned that. Okay, go down to the next one, Carla. Social emotional relationship is interesting as well. The typical 2-year-old has different interactions for mom and dad. You know, when they want something, they're going to approach mom differently than they do dad. They're going to approach their caregiver differently. When my son's caregiver was told me that my son was so courteous and pulled the chair out for the teacher when they were going to sit down and interact, I'm going, who does that? I mean, it didn't sound like what my son does at home. They can be very interactive with their peers and their siblings, other children at daycare, or in their neighborhood or place of worship. Each of these people has different responses to the child's own emotions, their crying, their joy, their pleasure in what they're doing. When polio hits, all of these people are gone that they've been familiar with for so long. Where are they? Who are these new people? The child does not understand that. The child feels some internal chaos with comments that come to them like, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Don't fight me, I'm just stretching you out. Who is this person who's moving me around? What are they doing? I don't like them. Where are my parents? Those are the questions that are going through their pre-verbal mind. The abandonment, trust, and detachment issues may surface for some children at this time. You may see them start pulling away since they can't, the parents can't help them. Or the parents may feel incompetent to care for their child because how am I going to adequately care for this child and all their needs when they come home, and still work and still care for all the other parts of the family. So there can be a lot of tension between parents at this point, and parents can start feeling detachment from each other, from their child, and more abandonment comes through. So I'm going to talk a little bit about trust when I get some more water here. Yes, I drink a lot of water. The child is kind of asking, even though they don't have the word, who do I trust? Where are my parents? Why did they leave me in this place? What are these people doing to me? And I can't move or get away from them or fight them because my legs don't work and my one arm doesn't work. Do I just give up and let them handle me? I mean, that's a terrible situation to be in. Why won't they let me hug my parents when they visit once a week through glass? What is the long-term impact of these losses? The long-term impact is a lack of trust and a lack of understanding of relationship issues long-term. Am I always going to lose people who are important to me? Let's look at their learning skills and their cognitive skills. The typical 2-year-old, as I say, I love 2-year-olds. They're just a riot to watch. Starting to feel some independence. They're starting to resist you as parents. They can do some activities alone. They can self-feed. They can look at books. They can carry a doll around or a truck around, play in the sand and scoop and dump sand. There's almost no sharing. They can play beside another child, but you took my truck. You took my scooper. I don't like that. There's a lot of learning about how things feel in their life. So the sensory issues become critical to their learning at this age. What they do and how they move, all of that is sensory. When polio hits, the child is able to learn, but they can't do any of these activities because they're confined to a crib 24/7. You know, at home, they got out of their crib. They probably snuck out in the middle of the night and went in and visited mom and dad, but they are in quarantine at the hospital. How does a 2-year-old understand this? It's so confusing in their brain. Why doesn't my body work? There's no way that they can understand that. The child has no words for this situation. There is minimal sensory stimulation and frustration does set in. The parents can see the child's frustration when they come to visit once a week, but they can't do anything about it because they can't hold their child. They can't touch their child and give them some soothing. The parents start pulling away since they hurt so much for their child. And that, again, brings up more detachment. Some of the sensory things, and some of you have heard me talk about, oh, that's a sensory issue. And I'm bringing it up because when you think of, in fact, the person who was asking me, or that I'm doing a little coaching with about her C brace, had polio at 6 months of age. Well, a 6-month-old is crawling. And what are they crawling for? They're not crawling for space. They're crawling for a toy or a parent or a bottle or something like that. They're trying to move because their vision or a smell, maybe their cookies cooking in the oven. Yum. Ooh, I'd like some. But kids continue to be still sensory seeking individuals. They love sand, mud, bright toys, noisy things. things that move. There's no sensory loss in polio. If you're having sensory loss now, it's because there's something going on in some nerves elsewhere in your body unrelated to the polio. But this lack of sensory stimulation, because they can't move, is very frustrating for the child. Vision is not impacted except for seeing new surroundings. They are usually delighted by seeing snow and pets and leaves and all those things, playing in freshly cut grass. They love seeing their family members' expressions and smiles. The child can intuitively now read their parents' facial expressions, especially when their face shows concern or love, but they don't understand the facial expressions of their new caregivers. And that challenges their trust. And trust is not a word they have, it's a feeling they have. Sound, the familiar sounds of home, some kid running through the house screaming, some kid playing outdoors on a swing that goes, am I good at that or not? The birds, the digging, all the sounds of nature outside, all the sounds of the family, of cooking in the house, those are gone. What they're hearing now is the clanging of bed rails. They're hearing other children crying. They're hearing the cast saw. They're hearing some children laughing a little bit because as they recover, they were able to get out of their cribs and play in another area. But the child is kind of scared of these new sounds and may pull away and feel detached. And again, that detachment is only a word that we use. It's a feeling for the child. Touch, so important to a child. I mean, the newborn, it's just critically important. To a 2-year-old, the comfort of their own bed. Now, how many of you have come home from a trip and go, oh, I'm finally in my own bed. It feels so good and so wonderful. Well, they're in a crib. They are not on the soft sheets that have been hanging out on the clothesline. They don't have their blankies and they don't have their stuffed animals. And their blankies and stuffed animals were often burned because they didn't know whether they were a source of the polio or not. The predictability of sensations at home were high on their list of enjoyment. Mostly the reassuring cuddles, the feeling of water in the bath or shower. In the hospital, they're having wet diapers again, and they were possibly toilet trained at home because there's not enough people to keep them dry. There's no one to take them to the bathroom because the nurses and caregivers are so busy. So there's a total disruption of predictability of touch, and that's very dysregulating for a child. Touch by caregivers may be unexpected, may be unwelcome, it may be painful. And the only the feeling of trust is broken there. They don't, again, have the word for trust. Can you, just sitting where you were sitting, feel in your body how you might tense up with unpredictable touch? I remember a time when my boss came up to behind me and she put her hands on my shoulders and said, "Hey, Karla, how you doing?" And I almost turned around and slugged her because that touch was so unpredictable and I hadn't heard her coming. So these kids are being moved without their permission. They're being touched without their permission. What is being done for pain? I don't have an answer to that, except for the hot wool blankets. Why aren't parents coming to hold them? Parents also need to touch their child in order to keep that connection. So there ends up being almost a mutual detachment at that point. In terms of taste, tastes of very unfamiliar food is what they're getting. Where are my macaroni and cheese? Where is my favorite broccoli, which I call a tree? Why can't I feed myself? Because my arm, only one arm works, and that's my non-dominant arm. Why can't mom and dad fix my food? This is a really hard issue for picky eaters. And some of you have raised picky eaters, and they're really a trip. I have lectures on picky eaters anyway. Food is also very relational for both the parent and the child. It's a time of the family being together, especially back in the 40s and 50s. And there were not cell phones back then. So you sat down and you talked with your family. You sat there and family encouraged you to make sounds while you're eating. It's a time of good relationship, but right now in the hospital for a 2-year-old is gone and they can't physically feed themselves. They don't understand why. So in terms of sensory issues, everything smells and feels different. Do you remember the smell of the hot wool blankets? I mean, that I could smell them to this day, and I only smelled them when I was in physical therapy training, and they were disgusting. The sounds of the kids crying in this big room and not being able to be comforted because there weren't enough caregivers. The parents are missing these experiences and don't know what the child is going through. And that's causing a gap between the parent and child. So there is some abandonment and detachment, feeling, not words, going on at that point. I'm going to briefly talk about the iron lung. I can't imagine being in an iron lung. I know that a 2-year-old or any age person is terrified by being taken out of the iron lung, even if it's just to move their body or change their diapers or change their sheets, because they cannot breathe very well at all when they are taken out of the iron lung, even for moments during their day. One of the biggest issues is the lack of sensory input, especially touch. You can't yes, they have portholes that people put their hands through to move you, but that isn't the same as being cuddled. The lack of space to move, if you can move anything, is amazing. You can be read to in an iron lung. You can look around if your neck works well enough to turn it, or you can look through the overhead mirror. But it's difficult to be heard because your voice quality often is not strong enough to call for help. And there's not good airflow for your voice, so your voice is not strong. There's terrible isolation. I can't begin to imagine the isolation. So trust, abandonment, and detachment are all felt again with no words, just the feeling by the 2-year-old. Somehow the children know that some children disappear during the night and never come back. Where does a 2-year-old put that in their brain? Are they going to disappear next? They have no concept of death at 2 years of age, and they have no concept of time. So it's very difficult. Hit it? Good, Carla. Just a bit on parents and family siblings. On Thursday, the 24th, apparently, this hasn't been 100% confirmed. I will expand this area tremendously in this talk. And for us Californians, if you want to listen in, you can, but it's at 7 a.m. And I don't guarantee anybody that I'm alert enough to do stuff at 7 a.m., but apparently they think I am. So let's talk about parents and family. Again, visitation. When the child was able to be at home rather than in a hospital, there was no question about visitation. There was some quarantining, because the other kids might not have been able to be in the same room for that 2 to 4 weeks of quarantine. But in the hospital, visitation was normally, the typical protocol was parents can come once a week and see you through glass. They cannot touch you. They cannot hold you. One child was seen by the parents twice in 2 years. Why wouldn't you feel abandoned? Why wouldn't you detach if that's what was happening? 2-year-olds have no sense of time. They don't understand where their parents, where their parents went. They don't understand, oh, it's Sunday. My parents get to come today. Why can't my parents hold me? The nurses complain that parent visitations are so upsetting to the child that the parents shouldn't come. And some parents did take that to heart and did not visit. Some parents were not able to visit because they were not able to get to their child because their child was so far away. And maybe only one parent drove, and that parent was not available, had to work that day. The parents' response to the child with polio is initially very supportive, and yet they are terrified that the child will die. And that was a big reality. They start to possibly pull away. Also, in communities and in neighborhoods, when a child had polio, socially, that meant that the family was, which is one of the reasons why my parents never told me or anybody that I had polio, because they, in their grand wisdom, hardly, could not accept the fact that I was sick and that I probably had polio. The extended family, the neighborhood, the community, all pulled away. And as most of you know, polio was almost never spoken about at home. It was not spoken about with the siblings, with the extended family, or the community. Parents themselves may be in different stages of accepting the reality of disability, and that can cause major chaos in the parent relationship. The one parent may be feeling, oh, this is going to work out. We'll make it work. And the other parent might be saying, no, the kid is going to die and I'm pulling away. And that kind of dissension between the parents can cause a terrible disruption for them. The parents try to support the siblings. They may pay more attention to the siblings and not to the child with polio. They may ignore the siblings and only give attention to the child with polio. And some siblings have come out with tremendous resentment about that. One woman who had been born in Nebraska and was hospitalized for polio in Denver, her mother was also hospitalized for polio at the same time. When the mother passed a few years ago, the siblings were just in an uproar over what was in the trust and who could have what and who was in charge of the trust. And this woman was in charge of the trust, and all of her siblings really disliked her. I've heard that story in many cases. Some were very angry at the sibling with polio because they were getting too much attention, or they ignored the sibling with polio, or they excluded the sibling from parties, birthday parties, that type of thing, because there were no accommodations to get that sibling into a different building or into a different place in the house. Many siblings have said that they were neglected by their parents in the 40s and 50s, and usually just one parent was working. So if you were a 4 or 5 parent kid household, you really had your hands full. Caregiving in the hospital, what was that like? A nurse had somewhere between 10 and 15 children to care for. And often there were as many as 40 to 50 children in one big room. The caregivers were on shifts, so the kids did not see the same person 24 hours a day. And also there were doctors, physical therapists, and a few other caregivers that were there. All ages were in the same room 24/7. In other words, teenagers could be lying right next to a baby in the same room. Once the child was no longer in quarantine or contagious and had some return of muscle function, they were allowed to play with each other, but they didn't know each other. And a 2-year-old doesn't know how to build relationships. No, it's mine. So isolation did continue, but interestingly, the game Candyland was developed at this time by a teacher who had polio, and she saw that the kids had nothing to do when they got together to play. So she developed the game Candyland for the kids who could get out of their cribs to play. Okay, my conclusions. In the present day, we have occasional little nudges or sensations of feelings, not necessarily the words, but we wonder what some of those feelings are about. They may be sensations such as somebody bumps into you and you kind of go, don't bump into me. You may have a moment of balance loss and wonder where that came from. You're moving pretty well. You may hear a couple of kids crying and you feel that more deeply than you might feel another small group of kids crying when you had never been hospitalized for polio. You see some food that just looks yucky. It could be hospital food that you're looking at, and it really is not appetizing, or you could smell the food. If you cough really hard and feel like you can't get a breath, that could be from the early weakness that you had and the assisted breathing that you may have needed. If these two words are not mine, they belong to Ina Pinkney, but I thought they were so appropriate. A medical deity may move your arm or your leg in a way that it doesn't go, just in examining you as an adult. You want to tell that person to not do that as a 2-year-old, but you don't have the words to tell them not to do that. But now you do have the words to tell them not to do that. So you need to advocate for yourself now and say, don't move me that way. I don't go that way. Or don't do that to me. That doesn't work. Or you know that is not something that a polio can do. We become advocates. We become teachers now. And so when you get those little nudges or sensations of feelings, those are probably from your early hospitalization, but now you can use your voice. You can put words to them and know that they came from your past and you can overcome them. And so many of us have overcome them at such a high level. We are really an amazing group of people in spite of our polio. So I'm done with this. And if you want to turn off the sound, and how did I figure out how to get rid of the slides? We could have some questions, but I would like to be able to see who's asking me the questions. Stop screaming.